Hello and welcome to another Budget Model Railways Train Shed Tuesday. I wasn't sure I was going to make one today actually. I've got a video that I did a couple of days ago that's going quite well, and usually I try not to do them because if you do another quick video it tends to slow the other one. But I realised I really enjoy nattering to you, all my model railway friends, once a week about all sorts of weird stuff. And I was actually looking forward to having a bit of a natter. So here we go. It is going out a bit later in the day. So I guess some of our many overseas viewers will catch this tomorrow morning, which will make it Wednesday. But hey, it's difficult to cater for the time changes. Anyway, so I'm ready for my brew. I've got my cup of tea in my railway mug, and I've got a rather nice piece of my wife's lemon drizzle cake, which unfortunately I can't virtually send to you. I'm a big Tron fan where they transfer things, matter and people. Great. The latest film is brilliant, by the way. The first Tron film's interesting. Doug suggested I watch it before I watch the update. Oh, my train's stopped. I know why it's done that. It doesn't like that wagon, so we'll run it round the other way. Let's run it round that way. But the latest one's really good. But in it, anyway, they can transfer matter. So wouldn't it be wonderful if I did have one of those laser things and I could send everybody a piece of lemon drizzle cake? One day I'm sure the technology will allow us not to do unimportant stuff, but to do important things like transferring cake. So if I stop occasionally, I'm either slurping tea or eating cake. So I even got a little bit organised today. I've done myself a little list of what I'm going to natter about so I don't forget anything. It's not in any particular order, you know me. I think whiffling was the word I came up with, and somebody did a wonderful, nice pretend dictionary definition of it. So I did go to the New Haven Model Railway Club show at the weekend, which is strange enough at Seaford. Always a good show. Me and Doug used to exhibit there back in the day. I was very taken with a layout there called Yantlit Creek, which was a very simple 00 minimalist layout, literally just more or less a little passing loop and some sidings, very little scenery, but very well lit. And I'll come to the box idea that he'd done, a lot of other people done, but a bit of a shout out. I'm really in this whole simplistic vein at the moment, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit this morning. I couldn't remember if I'd mentioned this book before. So it's Ian Rice, Creating Cameo Layouts. And I was actually told to have a look at it by people online. And I think it was last year sometime. And they're very expensive, even second hand, like 15 quid. And I walked into a charity shop, a Lions bookshop in Uckfield. And there it was for about 3 quid. So I snapped it up. It is a good book if you can get a cheap copy. My only criticism of it would be that it's largely 00. And trying to constrain everything in small spaces in 00 is a lot more challenging actually than doing it in N. For which, witness this layout, which is only 60 centimetres by 23 centimetres. But I've got an oval, a shunting loop there, and I'll try and do over the back without cutting myself off. Bear with me. We have a 2-road fiddle yard at the back there as well. All possible. Now it is flexi track. It's a very narrow curve, obviously, a very tight curve, but that will run round it. The trams will run round it, and the steam train will run round it with some modifications. Have a look at the last video I've just done where I talk about this layout a little bit more. So I sat and built this last night, which is the back scene, if you like, for it, out of offcuts of ply. Some supports to keep it in place while it's drying. Had to take it indoors. It's cold out here, and the glue wasn't setting, even with a little heater on. Now, one of the ideas I'm going to do with this layout, you're going to have to bear with me while I fiddle around a bit, is I'm very taken with these layouts I've seen on the exhibition circuit. Myself and Matthew at Something have been talking about it for a while. There we go. And it's where they have like a frame and a lid, and they light it like that. Now I happen to have this fluorescent tube that fits, although Doug might get me some LEDs. I'm toying at the moment with what to do. So if you imagine a fascia all the way round this, and then this, it's because the light on-off switch is there. and then this in there. So that's what I'm going to try with this. Now this layout, I've said in the headlines about it being a challenging layout. I'm not going to call it the most challenging we've ever built. The most challenging we've ever built was the cardboard layout that we built. Now put that in perspective, we're not talking about scenery here. We're talking about the entire baseboard was made from corrugated cardboard, and it was a 3-layer layout. So that was quite challenging, and because we didn't know we could do it. Go back through it some years ago, but all the videos are there. Doug was about 12, I think. So it's probably about 10 years ago. And that was a real step in the dark. You know, we didn't know if it was possible. Nobody had done it. Everything we had to, you know, make up as we go along. But this one's challenging because the idea of this will go on my motorbike. I've got a couple of motorbike ideas, but this is the one I'm working on at the moment. So it'll be in one piece. It'll be bungeed to the pillion. I might look at bolting it with some brackets as well. But it's got to be quite robust. But I'd like to exhibit it because A, it shows you what you can do in a small space. It also is part of the shelf challenge, being the 60 centimetre shelf challenge. And I want it to be self-contained. So it's been built quite robustly. So that it'll have the lid on and it'll have a back and a front all screwed in. And the idea is then that I can strap it to the back of the bike and take it to exhibitions, which will mean I don't need to use the car. Means my wife can have the car at the weekends if I'm exhibiting. So things like I've been invited to East Grinstead and Bluebell, which are 2-day shows, and much easier for me to nip backwards and forwards on the bike. But it's a challenge. Scenery wise, I haven't completely got it, but what I want to do is copy. I'm going to just pause us a minute. I want to copy this look, the very simplistic look, which is really working for me at the moment. It's still my favourite layout. Now, one of the options is actually I could have fixed a back and a front on that layout that I've just shown you and transport that. It gets more complicated because it needs a fiddle yard and the timber's not strong enough to screw things into, which is why I'm having a go at making a completely new one. I've also got an idea to do a 2-part one with one side of each in a pannier. I've got saddlebags. So, and I've got some Kato, very narrow track curved track to look at that. So watch this space. But so far this is working. Now I haven't forgotten my other projects. So the US one here, I'm still really keen to do. I'm back in the shed now. I've started reorganising. I've got a bit of locos and rolling stock for this. So this isn't going to be forgotten about by any stretch of the imagination. The cunning plan to do something very clever with that multi-level is on hold at the moment. It's possible, but it's a big project. It means doing a lot of very complicated curves and backs on it, and I'm really excited about it, but possibly not for this year. I think it's important anyway. I think it's important anyway to have a few projects in the back of your mind. So all my layouts at the moment, I'm trying to keep fairly simple. One of the things I find interesting, I stopped there for a cup of tea and a piece of cake. I'll come to this in a minute, because that's magically appeared since the last shot. One of the things I find interesting is when I go and do a relatively simple layout, and well-meaning people suggest, why don't you add this complexity? Why don't you add that complexity? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? It's like when people say, why don't I link all my modular layouts? Well, given that the vast majority of my modular layouts are single-ended or loops with no entry point, there isn't actually a way of doing that without massively changing the actual layouts. And I find it quite interesting. This whole, you must have 4 or 5 loops. You must have an incline. Your loops must be joined. You must have loads of sidings that you're never going to use. And you particularly see that on exhibition layouts. Layouts with loads of sidings. They don't even store locos in them or rolling stock to give an impression. And I'm getting a bit bemused by it. Why do we try and make layouts complex? It's almost as if somebody's decided that they must be complex to be proper model railways, or that you're not using your imagination if you're not getting complex. But actually, like so many things in life, complex plans don't work. Simple plans work. I remember this from some of my ACF training on things like tactical field exercises. Simple plans work. There's less moving parts. They're easier to communicate. I could get a bit controversial here. Colonel H. Jones VC famously did the briefing for Goose Green where he was killed, and VC was one. But some of the officers left the 11-phase briefing completely confused as to what it was they were supposed to be doing. It didn't really matter because, like any plan, no plan survives contact with the enemy. So it all went to rat shit quite quickly. But the point was it was a very complicated plan. And model railways, I wouldn't like to do the analogy, but we're getting near remembrance. So it's like a lot of things in life. A complicated plan. Let's do this, and this, and this, and that, and the... Yeah, well, it's moving parts. And I find a lot of things are easier. Break it down. In fact, usual military teaching is if you've got a complex problem, break it down into simple parts and solve the simple parts one at a time. And that's in some ways how I make my layouts. I built the baseboard separately. I laid the track because it's the only track that would fit. I've then decided to use it for the box layout, which means adding some sides. I then don't want an oval, which means that I've got to put a back scene in where it will fit. And that's how my layouts tend to evolve. It's one of the reasons my bigger layout in the shed is never quite happening, because again, I'm tempted to do a complex layout. In fact, I've now decided I'm going to do a simple layout, an end-to-end, just for my pocket line stuff. But one idea I did take from the book, I'm not sure if I can find the picture now, was that to do it modular with options. So you've got a modular layout there, a corner and two ends. And the idea is that I need it to be this way round in the shed, but the other way round if I wanted to exhibit it. So I could actually make the main length module and then two different side modules. One going towards me in the shed, because I want it to go in this L-shaped, and one the other way round for when I exhibit, because I'll need it to go around the edge of a table. So that is still very much there. I've got a number of buildings that I have got that really interest me, that I think would look good on a layout. So that's still a very interesting project. So I've just reminded me I'll look for something else. I'm getting sidetracked. I just remembered I had that, a little buffer stop. So why is this here? Right, so you'll know that Metcalfe support me very well by sending me complimentary buildings to review. And I happen to mention, one of the things I'd like to see is the UK equivalent of this, which is a little lock-up goods shed. And you don't really see them much in N. There's a couple available. Wills make a really nice timber one in 00. And now obviously there are smaller goods sheds. There's the Pico one that is quite small in N, that's quite nice. But what I want is a smaller building that would sit on a platform. Anyway, I suggested it to Paula at Metcalfe, and she came back and said they think it's a great idea and they're going to do it. So there you go, my little claim to fame. Now, I'm sure it'll be a couple of years till it comes out. I know these things have a long lead time, and they'll already have lots of projects, I'm sure, in their to-do list. But eventually, when you see the station lock-up goods shed come out, I hope they know I do N, so hopefully they'll do 00 and N. They usually do. It came from a Budget Model Railways idea. So just file that one away. So that's how far I've got with that. I've also done, my wife's quite a good watercolour painter. In fact, at one time she did a back scene for me. And she's quite into her art, and I'm quite interested. I've got a very good, I can't remember the guy's name, I'll find it for next time. A guy who paints steam engines. But in his book, it's very interesting because he talks about the creative process. And I'm beginning to think about model railways a lot more now as art, particularly with N, where you can build one small project. So, as an example, I'm sorry, I know people don't like me whipping around, but that was an attempt to do an autumn layout. That was an attempt to do a simplistic layout. That, if you like, it's got a bit moved around, but that's my urban layout. Different styles, different techniques. What do I want to try differently? Obviously the Japanese one. That's hugely different. And I've said this before, the interesting thing is, if I paint a picture, if I imagine and paint a picture of a railway station, I'm an artist. If I imagine it and scratch build it, I'm a model railway geek. You know, it's interesting that a lot of, again, I don't want to be too controversial, but a lot of ladies' hobbies get called crafts, making them a craftsperson or craftswoman or craftsman, depending on how PC you are. But if you make a model railway, there's not this attention. Now, if you think some of the ones we've seen that are superb works of art, they are works of art. We are artists in the model railway world. We're craftsmen. And I think that needs realising more often. Even if somebody's just got a load of ready-made stuff and plonked it down, there's still an interpretation. But when you get to the other end of the scale, like a fabulous one that was at Seaford, which was actually made using Colin Ahern's plans in the 1970s for the buildings, every building is scratch built. That's a work of art. So I tend to think of this now with model railways being a craft, being an art. It's a creative process. What can I try that looks different? And even if you're working on one big layout, really the same still applies. You're making lots of little scenes. They just happen to be joined together. Especially where people do, you know, different look in each part of it. Just stop for another bite of lemon drizzle cake. My wife does make some exceptional cakes. Really does. Positive contribution to my model railways, really. When I was at the doctor's recently, he kind of hinted at the fact that I'm possibly a little bit underweight, which I should be grateful for, really. I flirt around just under 10 stone and I'm only, 5'6", something 5'7" tall. It's not a lot of me. But I decided to twist that and come home and say to my wife that the doctor had said I was underweight and I needed to eat at least one large piece of cake a day. So there's a bit of a family joke going on that I'm on doctor's orders to eat one piece of cake every day. You've got to try these things, haven't you? You know, it's worth a try. So I've got this. They do, excuse the bashed chimneys, they do the waiting platform as well. Oh, there we go. It's right in front of me. Both great little kits. I've got reviews of both of them. Just wonderful. That one in particular. Apparently there's another one coming out in the range, and then at some point there'll be the good shed. So my plan is when they're all out, which will be a couple of years, then I'll build a little layout just using the Metcalfe Cardley range, which is the new small range. So there we go. Quite a lot of rambling and whiffling this week. Hopefully haven't offended too many people. Might have inspired a few. And I think that's something I never expected. When we started doing budget model railways, we weren't even sure anybody was going to watch. In fact, we did a video of how chuffed we were when we had 300 subscribers. We now have 35,000. I can't believe that, 35,000. Which kind of proves that there is a demand for the simpler, cheaper model railways. And what I would ask is, if you support us, then please do share what we do. Bring it to other people's attention. I meet some wonderful people who give us shout outs online and things like that, and in clubs, and it's always nice to meet people. So, if you enjoy what we do, spread the word. But thank you very much for those of you that support us and subscribe. And we still have, I don't know what they're called now, patrons and so on, who are the people that even contribute financially to what we do, which is absolutely wonderful. Thank you, guys. And I know adverts are a pain in the arse, but please remember it's the adverts that mean that I can keep making layouts. I couldn't afford to keep making little layouts just by making them and selling them. The income that we get from the adverts from YouTube is what enables me to keep funding other projects. So I apologise. I know they're a pain in the bottom, but thank you for putting up with them, because they do contribute to what we do. I would say, having cleared the shed out, believe it or not, it's in a bit of a mess again. But that's because I was in here last night actually unpacking and sorting. But actually, although it looks messy, it'll all tuck away. And what it's enabled me to do is have a bit of a reorganisation. One of the things with some of my challenges is I like to be able to see things. So a pile of stuff like that is better for me than having it in a box. When it's in a box, I can't remember where I've seen it. When it's all on the side, I know where I've seen it. But what it has shown me having a reorg is that I really don't need to buy anything else. I've got boxes full of buildings, bags full of scenery stuff, cabinets full of locos and rolling stock. So I really don't need to buy anything else. So that's a bit of a help, because it means I can now concentrate on using what I've got and just buy a few things here and there when I need them for projects. I still tend to buy things cheap when I see them. I don't think I've got it handy. No, I managed to pick up a original Fowler 1970s complete station kit the other day, very cheaply. So when I see things, I will buy them. But a lot of the heavy duty lifting, hopefully financially, is gone. So there we go. Lots to talk about today. I'm just going to go now and finish my cake and my tea. And I'll speak to you again soon.